Discover the captivating story of George Hainsworth, a true pioneer in NHL history, whose legacy as one of hockey's greatest goaltenders has been unjustly forgotten. In this in-depth biography, we journey back to the roots of Canadian hockey, exploring the raw, unforgiving world of frozen ponds, makeshift rinks, and a sport born from immigrant dreams and industrial grit. From his early days in a changing nation shaped by wars, pandemics, and economic hardships, to his rise as a professional star, Hainsworth embodied quiet determination and unbreakable spirit. Uncover the dramatic milestones that defined his career, stepping into legendary shadows, shattering records that stand unchallenged today, and leading iconic teams through triumphs and controversies. Delve into his personal world, family bonds, hidden struggles, and a life beyond the ice that reveals the human side of a sports icon. We'll examine the debates surrounding his achievements, the cultural clashes that marked his path, and the tragic twist that ended it all too soon. If you're a fan of NHL legends, vintage hockey tales, or inspiring underdog stories, this video is for you. Hit play to rediscover why Hainsworth's impact on the game endures, and subscribe for more forgotten heroes of sports history. Don't miss out. Let's lace up and dive in. To really understand George Hainsworth, we need to go back to the Canada of the late 1800s. The country had only been officially united through Confederation in 1867, and it was still finding its footing as a young nation. Cities were growing rapidly, fueled by immigration and industry. Toronto, where George was born on June 26, 1893, was a vibrant, expanding metropolis. Its streets echoed with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, and the skyline was dotted with factories belching smoke from coal-fired chimneys. This was the tail end of the Industrial Revolution in Canada, a time when railroads connected distant provinces, and waves of immigrants from Europe arrived daily, seeking opportunity in a land of vast wilderness and harsh winters. George's parents, John Hainsworth and Matilda James, sometimes recorded as Mary James in older documents, had emigrated from England, part of that immigrant tide chasing better lives across the Atlantic. John started humbly as a plumber in Toronto, working long hours in damp basements and cold workshops, fixing pipes and installing fixtures for the growing middle class. He was skilled and ambitious, eventually owning his own business called Hainsworth Plumbing, which catered to the needs of Toronto's expanding neighborhoods. But like many families, the Hainsworths sought stability amid economic fluctuations. They moved to Berlin, Ontario, a town with strong German roots, later renamed Kitchener in 1916 due to anti-German sentiment during World War I. There, John transitioned into a more secure role as a water commissioner, overseeing the town's water supply and infrastructure. It was steady work, providing for the family in an era when job security was rare. Hockey in those days was worlds away from the professional spectacle we know today. It evolved from informal games on frozen ponds and rivers, influenced by Scottish shinty, Irish hurling, and indigenous lacrosse-like sports adapted to ice. Rules were rudimentary, often made up on the spot, with wooden sticks, no helmets, no masks, and frequent brawls that left players bloodied. Protective gear was minimal, just leather pads that offered little cushion against flying pucks or slashing sticks. The game was raw, played outdoors in biting cold, where endurance mattered as much as skill. For working-class families like the Hainsworths, living in Toronto's Kew Beach neighborhood initially, hockey was a communal escape. Neighbors would flood backyard rinks or head to local ponds, turning winter's hardships into joy. As the family settled in Berlin, young George absorbed this culture. The Great War loomed, starting in 1914, bringing devastation, millions dead, economies strained, and a surge in Canadian nationalism. Amid this, hockey became a symbol of resilience, a way for communities to rally. For George, born into this shifting world, the sport wasn't just fun. It tested character, teaching him that quiet persistence could overcome chaos. Growing up with Victorian values fading into modern progress, he learned early that success demanded calm focus, traits that would define his remarkable career. George's path to hockey stardom started small and simple, just like many great stories do. Born into a working-class family in Toronto's Kew Beach area, He spent his early childhood surrounded by the sounds of Lake Ontario's waves and the bustle of a growing city. As a boy, he likely first laced up skates on frozen neighborhood ponds or makeshift rinks, drawn to the thrill of the game during those endless Canadian winters. The family relocated to Berlin around his early teens, seeking the stability of John's water commissioner job. Berlin was a tight-knit community with a mix of English and German influences, where hockey was woven into daily life. George wasn't physically imposing. He topped out at just 5 feet 6 inches tall and about 150 pounds, slight by modern standards, and even then, it raised eyebrows for a goalie. But size didn't deter him. What set him apart were his lightning-quick reflexes, unshakable composure, and an innate ability to read the play like a chess master. He dove into organized hockey around 1910, joining the Berlin Union Jacks, a junior team in the Ontario Hockey Association, OHA. It was all amateur back then, no salaries, just pure love for the game and maybe a free meal after wins. George gravitated to the goalie position early, embracing its solitude and high stakes. Picture him in net. No face mask, just a basic leather chest protector and leg pads, facing down pucks shot from heavy wooden sticks at speeds that could bruise or break bones. He thrived in that pressure cooker, his small frame belying a lion's heart. By his late teens, he advanced to senior levels, playing for the Berlin City Seniors. The games were intense, often held in chilly arenas with rowdy crowds cheering from wooden benches. In 1916, amid World War I's shadows, George joined the Kitchener Greenshirts, another senior OHA team. The war disrupted everything. Many young men enlisted, leaving teams shorthanded, and games carried a somber tone as telegrams brought news of fallen soldiers from Europe. George, perhaps exempted due to family obligations or his age, stayed in Canada and focused on hockey. He worked odd jobs alongside playing, possibly helping in his father's plumbing business, which grounded him in the blue-collar work ethic that permeated early hockey players. These weren't pampered athletes. They balanced day jobs with grueling practices, traveling by train to games in snowstorms. A major breakthrough arrived in 1918, a year etched in history for its hardships. World War I finally ended in November, but the Spanish flu pandemic ravaged the globe, killing tens of millions, including countless Canadians. Communities quarantined, funerals became commonplace, and hockey leagues teetered on collapse as players fell ill or mourned lost teammates. Yet, amid the gloom, George led the Kitchener Greenshirts to victory in the Allen Cup, Canada's premier amateur championship. It was a gritty campaign. The Greenshirts battled through regional playoffs, facing teams like the Toronto Dentals and Hamilton Tigers in hard-fought series. George's steady saves were pivotal, his calm demeanor inspiring confidence. The final against the Winnipeg Ypres was a tense affair, with Kitchener prevailing 4-2 in the deciding game. This triumph symbolized renewal, proof that normalcy could return. Crowds celebrated, and for George, now 25, it boosted his reputation as a dependable netminder. He stuck with the Greenshirts for 5 more seasons, refining his craft. Practices were rigorous, endless drills on outdoor ice, building endurance against the elements. George's style emerged, stand-up, economical movements, no wasted energy. He wasn't flashy like some goalies who dove dramatically. He positioned himself smartly, letting the puck come to him. One overlooked milestone came in 1923 during an OHA playoff game against the Toronto Argonaut Rowing Club. This match, held at Toronto's Mutual Street Arena, wasn't just routine. It marked the first hockey broadcast by Foster Hewitt, a young announcer whose voice would later define the sport. Hewitt's call, crackling over primitive radio waves, reached homes across Ontario, describing George's key saves in a 4-3 Kitchener win. George had no idea he was part of broadcasting history, but it hinted at hockey's growing popularity. At age 30, a late bloomer by any measure, George finally turned professional. He'd resisted pro offers before, content with amateur stability, but opportunity knocked. Newsy Lalonde, manager of the Saskatoon Crescents in the Western Canada Hockey League, WCHL, signed him on a recommendation from Leo Dandurand, part owner of the Montreal Canadiens. The contract, $2,500 per season, solid pay for the era when average workers earned under $1,000 yearly. George packed his bags and headed west to Saskatoon, a prairie boomtown thriving on wheat exports and railroads. Life there was rugged, long train rides between games in Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver, enduring blizzards and isolation. The WCHL was known for wide-open play, high scores, and physicality, contrasting the defensive East. George adapted swiftly. In his 1923-24 debut season, he played 30 games, posting a 2.80 goals against average, GAA, respectable in a league averaging over 4 goals per game. He notched 4 shutouts, showing his poise. Teammates nicknamed him the Little Giant for his stature and big saves. The next year, with the team renamed the Saskatoon Sheiks, he improved to a 2.63 GAA in 24 games, helping them to a strong finish. By 1925-26, his final Western season, he played 36 games with a 3.03 GAA and 2 shutouts, facing legends like Frank Niber and Cyclone Taylor. But tragedy shook the hockey world in November 1925. Georges Vezina, the Montreal Canadiens' iconic goalie, collapsed during a game, diagnosed with tuberculosis. Vezina, who'd played every Canadiens game since 1910, died in March 1926 at 39, leaving a void. The league honored him with the Vezina Trophy for top goalie. As the WCHL folded in 1926, selling players to the NHL, Don Durand acted fast. He paid $5,000 for George's rights and signed him to $6,500 annually, a raise reflecting his value. At 33, George debuted in the NHL with the Canadiens, stepping into Vezina's immense shadow. Montreal fans revered Vezina as the Chicoutimi Cucumber for his coolness. Replacing him was daunting. George's first season, 1926-27, was stellar. 44 games, 28 wins, 14 shutouts, 1.47 GAA. He won the inaugural Vezina Trophy, easing doubts. He repeated in 1927-28, 26 wins, 13 shutouts, 1.05 GAA. But 1928-29 was his magnum opus. In 44 games, George tallied 22 shutouts, half the schedule goal-free, and a minuscule 0.92 GAA, records still unbroken. Rules then restricted forward passing, lowering scores, but his focus was unparalleled. Montreal's Forum buzzed with fans chanting his name. Opponents like Boston's Eddie Shore fumed at his impenetrable net. The Canadiens, bolstered by Howie Morenz's speed and Aurel Julia's scoring, dominated. The early 1930s delivered pinnacle success. In 1929-30, George played 42 games, 20 wins, 4 shutouts, 2.42 GAA. But playoffs shone. He set a record 270 minutes, 8 seconds without a goal, blanking Chicago and Boston en route to the Stanley Cup, defeating Boston 4-3 in the final. It was Montreal's third cup. They repeated in 1930-31. George with 26 wins, 8 shutouts, 1.95 GAA in regular season. Playoffs saw them edge Boston and top Chicago 3-2 in a dramatic best-of-5 final. George was the anchor, his saves legendary in an era of turmoil. The Great Depression hit in 1929, causing widespread unemployment, bank failures, and soup kitchens. Hockey provided solace. Tickets were affordable escapes, and George's reliability mirrored fans' need for steadiness. In 1932-33, George etched more history as Canadiens' captain, one of only 8 goalies ever in NHL annals. He wasn't a rah-rah leader. His quiet example motivated. That year, 25 wins, 8 shutouts, 2.00 goals against average, though playoffs ended in semifinals loss to New York Rangers. Hockey's business realities surfaced in 1933. Don Durand, facing dipping attendance amid depression and cultural shifts, traded George to Toronto Maple Leafs for Lorne Chabot. The rationale: Chabot, French-Canadian, would draw Quebec fans. George, English-speaking Ontarian, was expendable. At 40, he joined rivals in familiar Toronto. He meshed well, posting 26 wins, 8 shutouts, 2.12 goals against average in 1933-34. A highlight? November 10, 1934, he faced the NHL's first penalty shot against ex-teammate Armand Mondeau, stopping it in a 2-1 win over Montreal. In 1934-35, 30 wins, 8 shutouts, 2.25 GAA, guiding Leafs to Stanley Cup Finals, losing to Montreal Maroons. He mentored youngsters, his veteran presence stabilizing. By 1936, rookie Turk Broda emerged, and Toronto released George November 25th. Retirement loomed, but when Canadians Wilf Cued injured himself, George returned December 12th to 20th, 1936-37, playing 4 games, 2 wins, at 43. A heartfelt coda. Career totals: 465 NHL games, 246 wins, 94 shutouts, third all-time, 1.93 goals against average, second to Alex Connell, adding WCHL 104 pro shutouts. After retiring, George returned to Kitchener, embracing civilian routine. He worked as a radio inspector for Dominion Electro-Home Limited, testing equipment in the burgeoning electronics field. Radios were household staples, broadcasting hockey nationwide. World War II erupted in 1939, evoking First War's horrors. George joined Kitchener's Civil Defense Guard, patrolling blacked-out streets, drilling for air raids, and aiding evacuations. It was stressful. At night, he pondered lost comrades, worrying for family amid rationing and newsreels of battles. Post-war, in 1949 at 56, he ran for city council as an alderman and won, advocating for water systems, echoing his father's legacy, and housing for veterans. It showcased his community spirit, leveraging fame for local good. George's personal life revealed a man of profound emotions beneath his stoic facade. He married Alma Elizabeth Wilhelmina Conrad on June 15, 1920, in Kitchener. Alma, from a local family with German heritage, was his steadfast partner through pro hockey's nomadic demands. From Saskatoon's isolation to Montreal's French vibrancy and Toronto's English hustle, she managed households alone during road trips, enduring train delays and George's absences. Their son, William George, affectionately Bill, was born in the mid-1920s. Bill inherited the goalie gene, starring in OHA junior and senior leagues with teams like the Kitchener Empires. He was talented, posting shutouts and earning praise, but opted against pro-life, perhaps to dodge the travel, injuries, and uncertainty George faced. Instead, Bill pursued stability, later working in mining in Val-d'Or, Quebec. Family tales depict George as a dedicated father, constructing backyard rinks in Kitchener winters, flooding them with hoses under moonlight. He'd coach Bill patiently. Position first, react second. It's not flashy saves, it's consistency. Summers meant fishing trips on Ontario lakes, sharing stories of prairie blizzards that forged his toughness. George cherished these moments, a counter to rink's intensity. One rarely shared anecdote underscores George's depth. Succeeding Vezina. The Canadians mourned deeply. Vezina was family, his endurance inspirational. Upon arriving in 1926, George felt the burden. Teammate Howie Morans recalled in later interviews a private chat. George whispered, "I'm not here to replace him. No one can. I'm just here to honor what he built." It exposed rare vulnerability. George seldom showed weakness, but expectations weighed heavy. His on-ice approach echoed this. Unflappable, wrestling inner doubts silently. A poignant quote from a late 1920s newspaper interview captures his humility. "I'm sorry I can't put on a show like some of the other goaltenders. I can't look excited because I'm not. I can't shout at other players because that's not my style. I guess all I can do is stop pucks." It highlights self-awareness amid era's flamboyant personalities like King Clancy. Fans adored his approachability. Post-game, he'd sign autographs with a warm smile, regaling kids with tales of Western League train rides through snowdrifts that delayed games. Yet, struggles lurked. The Depression squeezed finances. Even NHL salaries demanded thrift. George saved diligently, investing in modest Kitchener property. His diminutive build invited skepticism. Critics sneered, too fragile, but he silenced them, enduring pummeling shots, bruises, and occasional fractures with grim determination. No goalie masks meant facial cuts were common. He'd stitch up and return. World War II amplified anxieties. Civil defense duties evoked First War's traumas, sleepless nights patrolling as bombers droned overseas. With Bill, joy mingled with subtle regret, pride in his son's talent, but a quiet wish he'd chased pro dreams. Still, George found solace in routines, Sunday family dinners of roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, echoing English roots, or quiet evenings with Alma, reading by the fire, discussing council matters. Not everything in George's story was smooth. There were debates and shadows that add complexity. The 1933 trade to Toronto ignited controversy. Officially, Donduran cited business, Chabot's French-Canadian appeal to boost sagging Depression-era crowds in Montreal. But whispers hinted cultural undertones. George, an Anglophone from Ontario, clashed with Quebec's rising Francophone identity. Historians view it as mirroring Canada's linguistic rifts, English dominance versus French pride, fueling separatist sentiments later. The trade polarized. Montreal faithful lamented losing their Vezina winner. Toronto embraced a local hero. George remained silent publicly, but privately, the upheaval, relocating family mid-career, stung deeply. His legacy sparks ongoing debates. Did rules inflate his stats? Pre-1929 to 30, no forward passing in offensive zones, curbed shots, easing shutouts. Skeptics argue his 22 shutout season, 1928 to 29, wouldn't translate today. Defenders counter, he excelled post-rule changes, winning cups, and dominated high-scoring WCHL. His stand-up style, upright, glove work precise, influenced successors like Jacques Plante, who adopted hybrid techniques. Why lesser fame than Morenz or Vezina? His reticent nature shunned publicity. No endorsements or headlines like showboats. Forums and books dissect. The Hockey News ranked him 9th among goalies in 2018, but 46th overall in 1998, reflecting evolving views. Historical lenses vary. Some biographers cast him as era's beneficiary, NHL expansion-aiding records. Others laud innovations. Stopping the 1934 inaugural penalty shot symbolized resolve, yet it's overlooked. His goalie captaincy in 1932-33 remains rare, highlighting leadership beyond vocals. Tragic irony marks his end. On October 9, 1950, at 57, George, an alderman balancing duties, drove home from visiting Bill in Val d'Or. Near Gravenhurst, Ontario, his car collided head-on with a truck on Highway 11. Eyewitnesses recounted a crisp autumn day, leaves golden, sky clear, until screeching metal shattered peace. George died instantly, broken ribs piercing his heart. The truck driver survived with injuries. Some speculate fatigue from council work. Meetings, inspections contributed, adding unsettled layers. Alma and Bill were heartbroken. His funeral at St. Mark's Lutheran Church in Kitchener drew hundreds, burial at Woodland Cemetery. George Hainsworth's impact extended far beyond rinks, molding hockey's essence and yielding enduring lessons. His 94 NHL shutouts, third all-time, behind Brodeur's 125 and Sawchuk's 103, and unbreakable 22 in one season. Benchmark excellence inspiring goalies from Plante's mask innovation to Price's poise. His 1.93 career GAA, second to Connell, and 104 pro shutouts underscored dominance. He proved undersized athletes could thrive, opening doors for compact stars like Theo Fleury or Martin St. Louis. In Depression and war eras, George personified resilience, small-town grit conquering elite dreams, offering hope when Canada grappled with poverty and conflict. Culturally, he spanned divides, guarding for French-centric Montreal and English Toronto, subtly easing bilingual tensions in a nation still forging unity. Politically, his alderman role modeled athletes' civic duty, akin to today's players like P.K. Subban in philanthropy, or Blake Wheeler in advocacy. Today his narrative imparts humility, success sans boast, actions over words. It spotlights overlooked trailblazers. In celebrity-saturated sports, his dimming recall urges honoring silent architects. Emotionally, it emphasizes family as sanctuary amid turmoil, and abrupt losses sting. Why pertinent now? In rushed, spectacle-driven society, George affirms true greatness murmurs, prizing depth over dazzle. His 1961 Hockey Hall of Fame induction and 2004 Ontario Sports Hall nod affirm this. Yet stat debates reveal history's fluidity. Rules evolve, but his feats endure. Looking back, George mirrors us: quiet triumphs, concealed sorrows, persistent influence. He halted pucks, yet reminded that humanity pulses under the sweater. Cherish the unsung, they harbor profoundest verities. Thanks for listening. Keep stories alive.